How did a young man from Memphis with only one arm become the only person ever to get his name on a commemorative bottle of Jack Daniels? And why did Frank Sinatra give him his private phone number? Join us next for a conversation with Angelo Lucchesi. Angelo, thank you for joining us today for a conversation with, and I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. Now, first, we have to establish, tell me how old you are.
I'm 90 years old.
You're 90 years old, and yet it took me weeks to get you on the phone and get you scheduled for this because you have a travel schedule that I couldn't believe. How do you...
It's good for me. It's like adrenaline. Keeps me going, keeps me happy.
So you grew up here. You were born in and raised in South Memphis in an Italian neighborhood.
On Florida Street. My father had a lot of houses, and they named the street Lucca, where my father was from, Lucca, Italy. And I was one of 13 children. And every time my father made sausage, none of the kids were allowed in the store. But I snuck in there when he didn't know it.
How old were you?
I was not quite five. And he turned around about 20 minutes after I was in there. He turned around to wait on the customer, and the machine was still going. And I stood up on a box, and the suction grabbed my hand and pulled it in.
That's how you lost your arm?
Yeah, it's a meat grinder.
It's amazing to me. I've heard you tell that story, but you were so little. I mean, it was like you just went right on with your life, like it didn't matter.
Wasn't much left to do, you know. It's how you look at life, you know. And I've always been that way, and I'm still that way.
Where'd you go to school?
Oh, when I went to school, a little Catholic school off of Main Street, there's a Grand Central Station called St. Joseph's Grammar School. It's demolished now. It's all gone. And then after I graduated from there, I went 1 year to Christian Brothers on Adams Street, and I broke this arm and kind of played hooky a lot. At the end of the year, I had but 2 credits, one in history and one in religion. So I went off to school. I went off to a little school in Coleman, Alabama called St. Bernard's. There was a Benedictine monastery there, and I went there for my 4 years. And,
for high school?
Yeah, high school, and I did well. They couldn't fail the president, so I was president of the class. But it worked out fine.
So when you got out of school, what were you doing? What year would that have been?
1941. I should have graduated in 1940 at Christian Brothers, but my playing around and all that monkey business, so it was in 41.
So the war was going on then?
Yes, it was, yes. And I just kept going, and then I went into the monastery for 2 years. I became a Benedictine brother for 2 years. And I was supposed to make my simple vows for 3 years, and I didn't think I could do it. So I opted to get out. And,
it's kind of interesting that you were in a monastery, and then you ended up being a famous salesman for whiskey.
I went from one extreme to the other.
Extreme to the other, and found success that way. So tell me the story of how you connected with Jack Daniels. What were you doing at the time?
I was the clerk in the retail store here on Poplar Street called Circus Inn. And Circle Inn, not Circus Inn. They named it Circus Inn after a while. I was told that a man wanted to talk to me about going to work. I was about 24 years old, selling a liqueur called Southern Host. It was during the war, and then in Southern Comfort you couldn't find, you know. So I went to a warehouse here who handled it, and a man walked in. He said, "My name is D.E. Motlow." Well, he was president of Jack Daniels still, but it didn't mean nothing, because Jack Daniels didn't mean much, you know. And I shook his hand, and that was it. 2 weeks later, I had to be in Nashville for my first trip. And I checked in at the desk with my confirmation, and I had no idea Mr. Motlow lived there. And he said, "Mr. We don't have a room for you. We can't get nobody out." He says, "Go over and sleep on the couch." I said, "I don't want to sleep in the lobby of the hotel." Well, anyway, I went over there, and they sent me a ham sandwich and a Coke, pillows and everything. I was disgusted. I had to meet somebody on my first trip. Had to be at Lippman Brothers the next morning at 9:30, and they said they'd give me a room at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I said, fine. So I was like this with my hand. I was kind of disgusted. About 11:30, a man walked through, and he waved at me like that, and I waved back. I said, I wonder who he is. So he asked the clerk, "What's that kid doing over there?" He said, "I don't have a room for him, Mr. Motlow." He said, "He got one arm?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I met a one-armed guy somewhere." He said, "Send a cot up to my room and tell the kid to come up." He never got rid of me. We became friends.
And then he hired you.
He hired me almost 10 years later, because I never was looking to ever go to work for Jack Daniels. And when I got to be friends with him, you know, I was single, he was a bachelor, and I spent weekends down at the distillery. Just I'd sleep on the back porch of one of the brothers. They'd make a pallet for me, you know, and that's how we be. And I traveled with him to buy apples to make apple brandy, and I'd go make. He'd pay my way to go to San Francisco. They didn't have a marketing division then. They did it all themselves, and I went everywhere he went. In fact, they thought I was a little Jack there for a while. So, make a long story short, then I never thought I'd ever want to go to work for Jack Daniels.
They had no salespeople at the time. They had no sales staff. Nothing.
No, they did it all themselves.
So at the time, now, were there laws against selling it in certain parts of the country? Wasn't it kind of hard to get?
No, it wasn't hard. They just didn't. They produced so much back in those days, and Black Label, they had so much of it. But the reason they had it is they didn't have a lot of distributors. They had retailers selling whiskey for them. But they were people like this. If they gave you the line, that was it. Their word was their bond. And then when they had a wholesaler, and when I first went to work, I asked him for a job, you know, in early '53. I asked him for something else. I asked for some tickets to see Vanderbilt play Alabama. He said, "Yeah, we're going to bring to see." I said, "Yes." I said, "How about a job?" It was a lull. I didn't hear nothing. I said, "Where are you?" He said, "What you asked me for?" I said, "Job." He said, "Aren't you working?" I said, "Yes, but the company I'm with is going to merge with somebody else. I didn't hear my name being mentioned." He said, "Ange, we ain't hired nobody yet." I said, "Make me the first salesman." He said, "Well, talk it over to see you," but he didn't promise me a job.
So it was your idea?
I asked him, yeah. And then we went to the football game, and I was leaving that Sunday. He said, "Come back here Tuesday, and I'm going to make you the first salesman that we ever hired."
I've seen some commemorative things they've put out, some history,
yes.
And famous people in their history, of course, Lem Motlow,
yes.
And you're on the list.
Well, Lem Motlow inherited the distillery from his uncle Jack Daniels.
So there was a real person.
Oh, yeah, Jack Daniels was a real person. Oh, yes, he was. He died in 1911. People think I knew him, but I told him I didn't get here until 1920.
You're not, maybe 90, but you're not quite.
But they don't stop to think that he died in 1911, you know. And I knew Mr. Lem Motlow well. I knew him well. It was like he was an icon. He was something in the business. He was there was a distillery in Tennessee called Cascade. It's where Dickel's made now. And he said they lowered their price. He raised his price. And he said, goods worth, price charged. Instead of lowering, he raised them. And that's where he's been doing everything.
Now, what kind of sales strategy would you have for something like that at the time in the 50s?
Well,
Things were...
Let me tell you about the salesman. You had a portfolio with Jack Green, 3 years old, 90 proof. We had 1-year-old whiskey called Lem Motlow, sold only in Tennessee. And we sold more at 1-year-old whiskey than we did Jack Daniels in Tennessee. I had 3 markets, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Nashville. And then they sent me to Chicago, they sent me to California, and I was kind of green myself. And go see if they had any. And then I went to Kentucky for 2 years. Took Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee for a while, and Mississippi was bootleg territory. But they had wholesalers like you got legitimate wholesalers. But that's the way it was. Things were different back in those days. Mm-hmm. You drank everywhere you went. You show the guy your whiskey, and they buy 1 fifth, 2 pints, and 3 halves. It's not like today. 50 cases of fifth, 50 cases of pints, you know. Mm-hmm. It's just different today. And somebody says, "Did you have to drink everywhere you went?" I said, "Oh, yeah." They said, "You must have liked that." So I think I did.
Now, when you were in Chicago, you ran into some shady characters up there,
well,
didn't you?
In 1953, November of 53, Mr. Motlow, we called him Hap. That was his name. That's what he wanted everybody to call him. He said, "Angelo, I want you to go to Chicago, call on them Italians." I said, "You know such thing as Italian." He says, "Well, whatever you call them." And I didn't know anybody there. He thought because I was Italian or Argent that I knew all the Italians. So I got a hold of my brother, Johnny. He knew some lawyers there. And this lawyer I called, and I told him I was in trouble. I'm coming to Chicago with Mr. Motlow. He met me at the Ambassador East, and
you had to find some Italians.
but he didn't know. We didn't know the price of a bottle of whiskey. He didn't know it. Mr. Motlow didn't know. I didn't know because I hadn't made Chicago yet. And then, well, we showed this lawyer how to write up the orders, and I had he got our money like this. In those days, you could do this. You can't do it today. He went to his secretary and said, "Miss Mary, give me 3,000. Give Angelo 300." I said, "There's discrepancy here." But he said, "If you need the more, that was a lot of money in '53." So this lawyer and I got in a taxi, and he told me before we hit the first stop, "This is mafioso." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But don't worry, they'll receive you." So we knock on the door, we go in, he started raising all kind of sand. And I said, "Hold it, I'm here to rectify what problem we have." I said, "What is the problem?" "We hadn't seen a salesman down in this district in 3 years." I said, "Well, I'm here to take care of that." He sat down, he reaches under the table, pull out a bottle of Grandad, 100 proof. "Let's take a drink to seal our friendship." So I did.
Okay.
I said to myself, "Here I go again." Anyway, he had a gun. He took it out and he put it in the drawer. So after he gave me the order, he gave me an order for 100 cases of quarts then and 50 cases of pints. I didn't know if they had that much in the warehouse. I never met the guy without a distributor.
You're making promises to sell all this enormous amount, and you don't even know if you've got it.
I was kind of worried. I was scared to tell him we didn't have it, But make a long story short, I got in the car with the taxi. I says, "Why can't we put that gun in it out of respect for you?" So we made 11 accounts, and 8 of them were mafioso. We sold 633 cases, not because I was a good salesman. They just hadn't seen anybody in those 3 or 4 years.
Did you have to take a drink to seal your friendship at
Every one of them. I came back half crocked. So in 1957, Wendy Smith, who was our national sales manager, who had a lot to do with the success of Jack Daniels, went to the Motlows and said, "If we don't stop selling free today, we won't have any whiskey in 4 years." Because the Motlows didn't have a lot of warehouses. Warehouses hold about 20,000 barrels. Today we got 70-something warehouses, and we got 54,000 barrels in some of them. But we got enough to sell 11 million cases right now.
Wow.
But that's the way it was.
Operation
Yeah,
back
everything
then.
was. That's the way it was. The Motlow sellers, they sold 500,000 cases. They was in high cotton. Mm-hmm. I never forget. We sold 250,000 cases. Mr. Motlow said, "Ange, Uncle Jack and Papa turning over in the grave." We had 250,000. We thought we'd have done something big. But I saw it come from 100,000 cases to 10 million.
Now, for a while there in the 50s, you were being a salesman, and then suddenly Jack Daniels started getting famous with certain famous people.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank God. 1967, now Frank Sinatra was put on Jack Daniels by Jackie Gleason at the 21 Club. Sinatra had some tough days too, and then he said he brought him in and he said, "This will make you feel better." And he liked it. And in 67, there was a fellow by the name of Mike Filio, whose uncle was Jilly Rizzo, Sinatra's right-hand man. He was with Sinatra everywhere they went. They called him the night before. When I'm in Nashville, he would pick me up to take me to Mass at 6:30. He picked me up that morning and says, they called me last night. Sinatra in all kind of sand. He can't find the Jack Daniels because we had a shortage. He said, "At the Copacabana." I said, "What the heck can I do about it? Give me the address." So I took it and went to church and we had coffee, and I went over next door. I went to Mr. Motlow first, the chairman of the board. He said, "Ange, go see Winton. He loves Sinatra." So I go in the sales manager. He said, "Be right back." He came back. About 10 minutes later, it's all taken care of.
What Mr. Sinatra wants, Mr. Sinatra
Well, he
gets.
got it. And then, but what's so funny, 2 weeks later, I was with my wife in the den at my house, and we was talking about where we wanted to go out to eat or stay home. The phone rang, and he said, "Hey, Paisano, you're my friend for the rest of my life. I love you." And I said, "Mr. Sinatra."
You knew it was him?
He said, "How'd you know?" I said, "You don't want to sound like you." I thought it was kind of a goofy answer, but he thought it was great. Then he talked to me, and then he talked to my wife. He gave me 2 telephone numbers. He said, "Keep these close to your heart."
He gave you his telephone number?
2 of them. He said, "These are mine. keep him close to your heart.
So that was the beginning of a friendship.
Yeah,
You were
and
friends
it sure did.
the rest of his
I'd
life.
see him twice a year, sometime once a year, but I'd be with him for a couple of hours. Nobody sit in the dressing room but me. He went. That's the way he was. So he would tell me things that were personal. So I told his wife, I said, you know, he says because he loves you and he trusts you.
I guess you can't tell me any of those things that he told you,
I
can
don't think so.
What was he like as a person?
Well, to me, if he liked you, not only me, if he liked you, you was his friend, and he was real charitable. If he read something in the paper about somebody who needs something, he automatically. They said I was at the Sinatra golf tournament. We started with them 23 years ago. He and his wife started a clinic for abused children. They call it Sinatra Children's Home in Palm Springs, and he didn't ask me. He had somebody else ask me. You know, he wouldn't do it. And then we came closer and closer. And then he used to walk on the stage and he'd say, "Jack Daniels, nectar to God, nothing like it." So I told the guy that's $1 million worth of advertising.
Exactly.
He raised over $2 billion in charity.
$2 billion
Yes.
with a B?
They got all the names and everything. First, when he read them off, he said, he don't know if the chairman of the board would like this, but I want you to know what he did. Mm-hmm. This was the master of ceremony.
Because a lot of that was secret, wasn't
Yeah,
it? He
that's the way he did about
publicize a lot of
everything, yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
If he donated something to, that's between you and I. That's the way he looked at it. But he was good. I mean, he'd call me kid. I didn't care. He didn't cuss me. He called me kid.
He called you kid?
Yeah.
But you weren't, were you that much younger than him?
5 years.
that made you
I never
kid,
told
right?
him that. In 1996, we were at a sponsors party right before the golf tournament. And we was talking, and his wife came by and said, "Honey, it's a lot of Jack Daniels next door. You and Angelo, come on." So he said, "I got to take a picture with the kid." So I was standing next to him, and I never would have done this. I don't know why I did this. I said, "You know, Francis, don't be nervous now. You're taking this picture with you." He said, "You don't want all to be nervous." I said, "I was when I first met you." And then I told him, "You're only 5 years older than me." He said, "I wish I had those 5 years, kid." Before the year was over, he went down like the Titanic.
His health failed really quickly.
In October that year, he sure did. He lived 2 years later, 1998, he died.
What's your favorite memory of him?
Just the way he would talk about family. People would say, I said, "Yeah, he talks about it a lot." He asked me, "My kids love me?" I said, "Yes, they do. And yours love you." He said, "Well, I'm sure you're right," he would say.
It's the Italian. It's the Italian.
Sure.
way to
And
talk
then
about family.
he was proud of his heritage. He was really proud. Whatever you did for him, he was appreciative. I was in his dressing room in Palm Springs, not Palm Springs, in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I had a fountain pen made from the oak, the barrel that the whiskey comes out. Hallmark makes them for us. Now, the man must have 1,000 fountain pens, at least 100 anyway. Mm-hmm. And I gave him this fountain. He said, "How'd you know I needed a fountain pen?" He's so appreciative. Mm-hmm. I would give him bottles that you couldn't find because the company would send them to me to give to him. And wouldn't be a lot. It'd be maybe 2 cases, but only 3 to a case. They were bottles you can't buy. And I just, it's easy for me to brag about him. You read about all the things he used to do, and everything. I was in a crowd with him, and they was talking about he and Sammy Davis and Dean Martin and Jilly Fowler with the bottle and the limousine. They just did a deal at Carnegie Hall in New York, and they walked, and they talk about his dimes. He stopped, and he'd call you at 3 o'clock in the morning. So he said, "Give me a dime." He never carried. He carried $1,000 and $100 bills.
And no change.
Nothing. No rosy beef, no nothing. Just because he had them all individual. And before he get to where he's going, he'd buy 10. He'd call you at 3. He didn't care.
What did he call you about? Just talking, or just
he
kind
just
of
want
making
to wake
sure
people up. And then they stop at a not a crystal. What they it's like a crystal, White Castle.
White Castle.
And they go in there and they have the bottle and they all order 5 cups, not glasses, 5 cups. And Mr. Sinatra said the guy, young kid, was just. I heard him say this. The young kid just got through cleaning off the grill, and he's ready to do some more business. And he said, "How many hamburgers you like?" He didn't know he was talking to Mr. Sinatra. He said 150. He was kind of hesitant, so Julie said, "No, we really need 150." So he went to cooking, and they drank out of the cup so nobody could see it what it was. The kids got through, and he says, "I'm through." And Jimmy pays the bill. Mr. Sinatra never pays the bill. Somebody with him would take care of it. And he'd go to his bookkeeper, his CPA. And when he got through, he said, "Give us 5 and put the other 145 in a sack." And he gave the kid $100 chip. He said, "You wouldn't be Mr. Sinatra, would you?" He said, "Yes."
Finally recognized him
He
there at the
says,
end.
"Why?" He says, "You know what? I don't tip $100. And they took the other 145 and gave it to a police car and told them to take that to the station.
Oh, that's a nice story.
Just something to do, that's
nice.
all. Now, they've done some other things, too. I don't know how I'm going to say it.
Maybe you should, I can't get into
I've
that
heard
part.
them say some things.
Speaking of commemorative bottles and special edition bottles, you have one in your honor that our viewers might have seen in the stores. Tell us how that came about.
I'm really appreciative that they did that for me. And
It's a beautiful bottle.
they did it on my 90th birthday. When they told me about it, the reason they had to tell me, because they want to know my favorite charities. Well, I got a lot of charities, but I thought of St. Jude, and I thought of Miss Sinatra's Hospital for Abused Children. And I told them that. So a couple of weeks ago, they donated $15,000 to St. Jude, $15,000 to her for her hospital.
I'm guessing the sales have gone really well.
Thank God.
It's hard to find those bottles.
I'm so happy. Because if they didn't sell them, I'd have to drink them. And, but I told the president, I don't know what to say. I just gave him a hug, and said, thank you.
Had they ever honored anybody like that before with their name on a bottle?
No.
That's amazing. That's a great way to thank you for everything you've done.
Well, you wonder sometimes what you really did, Because what I did, I enjoyed. It was like I do today. I make a lot of talks. All the accolades are good. They're good for the moment, and they're good for your memories. Some people say you're famous. I'm famous. That's a bunch of baloney. But the way with me, I told you what Monsignor told me. I didn't know how to be famous. And that's the way I feel about life. This whole life is good. I'm on dialysis. I have my diabetic, and I got neuropathy, but I can handle all that. It's just part of what's with me now. And where I go, I have my dialysis done. I was in Chicago last week. I had it done then. I have it done anywhere I go, and the company's extremely good to me, and I have people pick me up and all that.
And you're not retired. I thought
No.
actually you were retired, and you're not.
No,
I guess you're never going to.
But I know eventually I'm gonna have to call it a day.
I can't
But
imagine when that's going to be.
I'm not gonna worry about it until he gets there. You know what I do right now? I make talks now, and then I visit retailers out of town to thank them for what they do for us. Because I see them, and I'm so tied up with computers today, they can't get around and become personal because we have distributors that do our selling for us. We have meetings with them, and I go with them, and they ask me to go here. Maybe you could help me here, and I do those things. But it's not because it's a job. It's just something that you enjoy doing. And I think everybody who works for Jack Daniel Brown Foreman feel that way. I'm one of 4 people that can sign anything with Jack Daniels, like the shirts, hats, bottles. The master distiller and the master taster and Lynn Talley. She's a master taster, and myself. Nobody else can sign anything with Jack Daniels. Now they gave me that privilege. I couldn't take that privilege. They gave it to me, and I love it. I love doing everything I do.
Well, I guess that sort of brings us to the conclusion. Do you have any final thoughts for our viewers today?
Well, I travel a lot, but I'm always glad to get back to Memphis. For some reason, I enjoy New York. I enjoy, where I go. I traveled Europe for 6 years for them, and I loved it. I loved it, but that was all. But when I get back home, say what you want to about it. It's great to get back to Memphis, and I just love the city, and I just hope it continues to grow. We got two good mayors now, and not that there's anything wrong with the others, but we've got two ones, and so I'm just so appreciative you asked me to come and speak with you.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come down here out of your busy schedule, and thank you so much. We've really enjoyed it, and this has been a conversation with Angelo Lucchesi.
Thank you, darling.